They say money can't buy love. But what happens when a billionaire realizes he's completely alone on his 60th birthday? One woman's simple act of kindness will expose a shocking family secret that changes everything. This is the story that proves sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest miracles. If you believe in the power of human kindness, hit that like button now and subscribe for more incredible stories that will restore your faith in humanity. I want to tell you about a day that changed two lives forever. It was a Tuesday morning in October, and Nathaniel Cromwell was about to discover something that would shake him to his core. You see, Nathaniel wasn't just any man. He was worth $3 billion, owned the largest pharmaceutical company on the East Coast, and lived in a mansion that could house 50 families. But on this particular morning, as he sat in his marble bathroom, getting ready for what should have been a special day, he felt poorer than he'd ever felt in his entire life. Today was his 60th birthday, and his phone hadn't made a single sound. Now, you might think that's impossible. Surely someone as wealthy and powerful as Nathaniel would be surrounded by well-wishers, right? Wrong. As he walked down the grand staircase of his empty mansion, past portraits of ancestors who seemed to judge him with cold eyes, the silence was deafening. His footsteps echoed through halls that had once been filled with laughter when his wife Margaret was alive. But Margaret had been gone for 8 years now, and with her went any warmth this house had ever known. The breakfast table, long enough to seat 20 people, had a single-place setting. His housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, had prepared his usual black coffee, whole wheat toast, and fresh fruit arranged perfectly on bone china that cost more than most people's cars. But she didn't meet his eyes when she served it. None of his staff ever did anymore. He'd made sure of that over the years, building walls so high that no one could climb them. As Nathaniel ate his solitary breakfast, he thought about the irony of his situation. He employed over 15,000 people, had business partners on 3 continents, and his contact list contained the numbers of senators, celebrities, and CEOs. Yet here he was, completely and utterly alone on the day that should matter most. His phone sat silent on the mahogany table. No calls from his son David, who was probably too busy spending his trust fund in Monaco. No messages from his daughter Sarah, who only contacted him when she needed money for her latest charity project that inevitably failed. No acknowledgments from his brother James, who'd stopped speaking to him after their father's will, reading 20 years ago. The morning dragged on like a funeral march. Nathaniel tried to lose himself in work, but even his board members, people who usually hung on his every word, seemed to keep their distance. His secretary had scheduled back-to-back meetings, but they all felt hollow, like actors playing roles in a play he was tired of watching. That's when Delilah walked into his office. Now, Delilah Jenkins wasn't supposed to be important in Nathaniel's story. She was just his assistant, not even his main secretary, just someone who handled his paperwork, organized his files, and made sure his schedule ran smoothly. She'd been working for him for 3 years, ever since she'd moved to the city from Alabama to support her sick mother. Delilah was 28 years old, barely scraping by on her modest salary, but she had something that all of Nathaniel's wealth couldn't buy: a heart that still believed in goodness. Most people were intimidated by Nathaniel. His steel gray hair, sharp suits, and reputation for crushing competitors made grown men nervous. But Delilah had never seemed afraid of him. She looked him in the eye when she spoke, said good morning with genuine warmth, and sometimes even smiled at his rare attempts at humor. On this particular morning, as she brought in a stack of contracts to review, she noticed something different about him. Maybe it was the way his shoulders sagged, or how he stared out the window instead of immediately diving into work. Delilah had grown up watching her grandmother read people-like books, and she'd inherited that gift. "Mr. Cromwell," she said softly, setting the papers on his desk, "you seem a little off today. Everything all right?" Nathaniel looked up, surprised. When was the last time anyone had asked him how he felt? "I'm fine, Delilah, just another day." But Delilah wasn't buying it. She'd seen that look before, on her father's face, during his last birthday, when he'd tried to pretend it didn't matter that his friends had forgotten. "Are you sure? You look like someone who could use a friend today." The word friend hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. Friend? When had he last had one of those? "What makes you think I need a friend?" Delilah hesitated, then decided to take a risk. "Well, it's just that today feels different. Important, somehow. Like it should be special, but—" She trailed off, watching his face carefully. And that's when Nathaniel's armor cracked, just a little. Maybe it was her genuine concern, or maybe it was the loneliness pressing down on him like a weight. But he heard himself saying, "Today's my birthday." The words hung in the air between them, and Delilah's eyes widened with understanding, and something that looked like heartbreak. "Your birthday?" she whispered. "And you're here, working, all alone." Nathaniel tried to rebuild his walls quickly. "It's just another day, Delilah. I don't believe in making a fuss over such things." But Delilah saw right through the lie. She'd watched this man for 3 years, seen how he checked his phone hopefully each morning, noticed how his face fell when it stayed silent. She'd observed him staring at family photos when he thought no one was looking, had heard him talking to his late wife's picture during late nights at the office. "Mr. Cromwell," she said quietly, "when's the last time someone celebrated you, really celebrated you? Not because they wanted something, but just because you mattered to them." The question pierced straight through to his soul. Nathaniel couldn't remember. Even Margaret, bless her memory, had been more focused on their social obligations than genuine celebration in their later years. I don't need celebrations, Delilah. Everyone needs to feel special sometimes," she replied, and there was such wisdom in her young voice that it made his throat tight. Everyone deserves to feel like their existence matters to someone. After Delilah left his office that afternoon, Nathaniel couldn't concentrate on anything. Her words kept echoing in his mind. Everyone deserves to feel like their existence matters to someone. Did his existence matter? His companies would run fine without him. He'd built them to be self-sustaining. His children would inherit his money, whether he was alive or dead. His employees saw him as a paycheck, his business partners as a means to an end. Meanwhile, Delilah was having her own revelation. As she sat at her small desk outside his office, she couldn't stop thinking about the profound sadness in his eyes. Here was a man who had everything the world said was valuable, yet he was spending his 60th birthday completely alone. It reminded her painfully of her father, who'd worked double shifts his whole life to provide for their family, but had died feeling like no one truly appreciated him. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became, not at Mr. Cromwell, but at the world that had let this happen. Where was his family, his friends? How does a human being become so isolated that no one remembers their birthday? As closing time approached, Delilah made a decision that would change everything. She thought about her grandmother's words. "Baby girl, when you see someone hurting, you don't walk by. You stop, you care, you do something, even if it's small." She had $43 in her checking account, money she'd been saving for groceries this week. But looking at Mr. Cromwell through his office window, seeing him stare at that silent phone one more time, she knew what she had to do. Delilah left work that evening, but she didn't go home. Instead, she went to the grocery store and carefully selected ingredients, not expensive ones. She couldn't afford expensive, but meaningful ones. She bought everything needed to make her grandmother's famous fried chicken, mac and cheese, green beans with ham hock, and cornbread. For dessert, she picked up the ingredients for a simple chocolate cake. By the time she returned to the office building, it was nearly 8 p.m. She used her key card to get back in, her heart pounding with nerves. She could get fired for this. Mr. Cromwell was very particular about boundaries, about maintaining professional distance, but something told her this was bigger than professional protocols. The executive kitchen on his floor hadn't been used in years. It was supposed to be for catering important meetings, but Mr. Cromwell preferred to have everything brought in from expensive restaurants. As Delilah rolled up her sleeves and started cooking, she thought about all the times she'd watched him eat those sterile, perfectly arranged meals alone. She cooked with love, the kind of love her grandmother had put into every meal, the kind that said, "You matter, you're worth this effort, you're not alone." The chicken sizzled in the pan, filling the empty office with the smell of comfort. The mac and cheese bubbled golden brown in the oven. The cornbread rose perfectly, just like her grandmother had taught her. While everything cooked, Delilah used her lunch money from the week to buy simple decorations from the convenience store downstairs: a small "Happy Birthday" banner, a single balloon, and a pack of candles. She set up the small conference room next to his office, the one with the view of the city lights. It wasn't fancy. The decorations were clearly from a convenience store. The table was just the regular conference table, with a tablecloth she'd borrowed from the supply closet. But it was real. It was genuine. It was filled with intention and care. When Nathaniel finally emerged from his office at 9 p.m., exhausted and ready to go home to another solitary evening, he froze. Light was coming from the conference room, and there was a smell in the air, something warm and inviting that he hadn't experienced in his office building ever. "Delilah?" he called out, confused. "Are you still here?" She appeared in the doorway of the conference room, suddenly shy and nervous. "Mr. Cromwell, I know this might be inappropriate, but I couldn't let you spend your birthday alone. I made dinner. Nothing fancy, just food that tastes like someone cared about making it." Nathaniel stepped into the conference room and felt something inside his chest crack wide open. The table was set for two, with actual cloth napkins, and the simple decorations that somehow meant more than any elaborate display he'd ever seen. The food looked incredible, real food, comfort food, the kind of meal that wrapped around you like a hug. "Delilah," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion he'd forgotten how to express. "You didn't have to." "Why would you?" "Because everyone deserves to feel celebrated on their birthday," she said simply. "And because in 3 years of working for you, I've watched you eat 1,000 meals alone, and I couldn't bear the thought of you eating one more." That's when Nathaniel Cromwell, billionaire pharmaceutical executive, broke down and cried. Not the controlled tears of a funeral or the strategic emotion of a business negotiation, but real, raw, ugly crying that came from the deepest parts of his soul. Delilah didn't try to stop him or comfort him with empty words. She simply pulled out his chair and waited. When he finally composed himself enough to sit down, she served him a plate of the most beautiful, imperfect, homemade food he'd seen in decades. "I used my grocery money for this week," she said quietly as she sat across from him. "But I kept thinking about my daddy. He died 3 years ago, and at his funeral, person after person stood up to talk about how much he'd meant to them. But I realized that he never really heard any of it while he was alive. People who loved him forgot to tell him. People who appreciated him forgot to show him." Nathaniel took a bite of the fried chicken, and it was perfect. Not because it was technically flawless, but because it was made with intention, with care, with love. "Your father was lucky to have a daughter like you." "No," Delilah said softly. "I was lucky to have a father who taught me that everyone deserves kindness, even billionaires who forget how to let people close." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and slowly, Nathaniel began to talk. He told her about Margaret, about how her death had made him afraid to care about anyone again, because losing people hurt too much. He talked about his children, how his attempts to provide for them financially had somehow created distance instead of closeness. He spoke about his brother, about business partners who saw him as a bank account instead of a person. Delilah listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions that helped him dig deeper into feelings he'd buried for years. She told him about growing up poor but rich in family warmth, about her grandmother's Sunday dinners, where everyone felt welcome, about her mother's illness and why she'd moved to the city. "You know what's funny?" Nathaniel said, as Delilah brought out the small chocolate cake she'd made, complete with 60 candles. "I have houses on 3 continents, but I haven't felt at home anywhere in years. Tonight, in this conference room, eating food from the grocery store. This is the most at home I've felt since Margaret died. When Delilah lit the candles and sang Happy Birthday in her sweet, slightly off-key voice, Nathaniel realized he was experiencing something he'd forgotten existed. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "Make a wish," she said, and he looked at her across the table, this young woman who had risked her job to show kindness to a man who'd done nothing to deserve it. Nathaniel closed his eyes and wished for something he hadn't wished for in years. He wished to be a better man, to be worthy of the kindness he'd been shown, to remember how to love and be loved in return. The months that followed that birthday dinner changed everything. Nathaniel didn't just promote Delilah to executive assistant. He began to see her as his moral compass, his reminder of what really mattered. More importantly, he began the hard work of rebuilding relationships he'd let crumble. He called his son David and had their first real conversation in 5 years. He reached out to his daughter Sarah, not with money, but with genuine interest in her dreams. He even contacted his brother James, swallowing his pride, to apologize for years of stubbornness. The changes weren't immediate or easy. Some relationships couldn't be fully repaired. Too much time had passed. Too much damage had been done. But others began to heal. His employees started to see glimpses of warmth beneath his professional exterior. His business partners noticed that he seemed more engaged, more present. Delilah, meanwhile, flourished in her new role. Her natural wisdom and emotional intelligence made her invaluable. But more than that, she became something Nathaniel had thought was lost to him forever: a true friend. A year later, on Nathaniel's 61st birthday, his dining room was full. David and Sarah were there with their families. James had flown in from Seattle. Several longtime employees joined them, along with neighbors Nathaniel had finally gotten to know. At the head of the table, in the place of honor usually reserved for the most important guest, sat Delilah. As Nathaniel looked around the table, at the faces of people who were there, not because they wanted something from him, but because they genuinely cared about him, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. But it wasn't just gratitude for the party or the people. It was gratitude for the lesson Delilah had taught him. She had shown him that wealth without connection is poverty, that success without love is failure, that all the money in the world can't buy what really matters. She had risked her own financial security to give him something priceless: the reminder that he was worthy of love, that his existence mattered to someone. During his birthday speech that year, Nathaniel raised his glass to Delilah. "A year ago, I learned that the most expensive meal in the world isn't worth a fraction of a meal made with love." One person's courage to show kindness to someone who didn't deserve it changed everything. Sometimes the greatest gifts come in the smallest packages, from the most unexpected places, when we need them most. Delilah smiled, tears in her eyes, and said, "Happy birthday, Mr. Cromwell. But more than that, welcome back to the land of the living." And that, my friends, is how a $43 dinner became worth more than $3 billion, and how a billionaire learned that the richest people aren't those who have the most, but those who love and are loved in return. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness costs nothing but means everything. Subscribe for more stories that prove love always wins, and tell us in the comments, what's the kindest thing someone has ever done for you? Remember, we all have the power to be someone's Delilah. We all have the ability to see past someone's walls and show them they matter. You never know whose life you might change with one simple act of genuine kindness.